Thank you, Representative Cobb. And I will just say that she is one of the most thorough legislators when it comes to the budget. She is an expert hand, and I was not surprised when she was tapped to be the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee. So they're in good hands, and you know, we'll get through it. We always get through it. It has to happen. So in any case, you are represented very well by an incredibly capable and talented legislator. So in any case, thank you. I'm Matt Gress, and I'm the governor's budget director. And we are going throughout the state to share the good news that's in our budget. We submitted it to the legislature on January 18th. And we've been talking to Arizonans from around the state, getting their feedback, hearing their concerns, and then bringing them back to Phoenix. I also have some folks here with me from my staff, and also a colleague of mine who's the Director of Constituent Services. So before we begin, I wanted to just introduce Trista Guzman Glover, who will share some of the other venues to reach out to the governor, to let your voices be heard, and the like. So Trista, would you mind coming up?
Hi, I'm Trista Guzman Glover, as Matt said, Governor Doucey's Director of Constituent Services. I'm excited to be here today to hear the discussion that we're going to have about the budget and the good news that Matt is bringing. I just wanted to let you know that myself and my staff, we're here anytime you have any concerns that you need to voice with the executive branch. We do our best to work on casework within state jurisdiction to help out if there are any issues. If it's outside of something we can handle, we try to facilitate a warm handoff working with our local and federal partners. So feel free to reach out to us whenever. Our office also handles all the proclamations and commendations that the governor puts out. So if you ever need anything of that nature, you can reach out to me as well. You can reach us at engage@az.gov. I also am here. I've got business cards if you'd like to come up and chat with me afterwards. And now I'll hand it off to the people that know about the numbers.
Thanks, Trista. So last November, Governor Doucey was reelected with 1.3 million votes, 56% of the votes cast, allowing him to have a new 4-year term. And across the state, as he campaigned, there were 2 priorities that were made abundantly clear: that Arizonans want their teachers paid and their budgets balanced, and this budget will do both. Over the next hour or so, we'll talk about our view of the national and state economies and their impact on our general fund revenues. We'll talk about some current year supplemental requests, and this is technical speak for those in the who've passed public budgets. What you think happens may not always turn out to be the case, and adjustments have to be made, and so we have a supplemental process that allows us to make current year adjustments because we are currently in fiscal year 2019. And then we'll move on to 2020 budget priorities of the governor. So from a national perspective, things have never looked better. The blue curve represents gross domestic product growth rates for the United States. This is the rate of growth of the economy as a whole. We're expecting to see a 3% growth rate in calendar year 2018 once the data is finalized over 2017. And to put that into perspective, we haven't seen that kind of growth rate since before the Great Recession. It has been fueled by one-time investments, such as factories, building new factories, or expanding existing factories. Those have really driven that GDP growth rate for 2018. So we don't expect that to be sustained in the out years, but we still are forecasting decent growth in 2020 and 2021. From a labor market perspective, the red curve represents unemployment, and we are approaching 50-year lows, so that's a really good sign. But there are clouds on the horizon. The blue curve represents the S&P 500. It's very volatile right now. And in 2018, we experienced some significant downward trends, spurred, in our view, on the Federal Reserve rate hikes. They control interest rates, trade tensions, and so that has added some concern, at least from a market watcher perspective. And it caused the Federal Reserve Board chairman to acknowledge in December that they may have to back off their interest rate hikes planned for 2019. And I believe a day or two ago, that actually took effect. What do these rate hikes mean for us, and how do we interpret them? It's about where investors put their money. Do they put their money into the stock market to continue expanding businesses, or do they retreat and put their money into low-risk treasury bonds that are affected by these interest rate hikes? So it's balancing the two, and right now there seems to be some optimism, especially with China and the U.S. Finalizing talks on the trade front. We're hoping to see some improvements on the stock market in the coming weeks. So ultimately, though, 2019 is still going to be a pretty good year, but we have to look in the out years and add some caution. So the unemployment rate on the national level, the Federal Reserve is still projecting lower unemployment rates, but they're revising upward that unemployment number. They're still expecting solid GDP growth in the out years, but they're revising down those growth rates somewhat based on recent market data. But Arizona is riding high right now, and we believe they will continue to do so for the foreseeable future. We're first in the country in construction job growth, second in manufacturing job growth, third in net immigration. The governor always likes to say people are voting with their feet by moving to states, and they're choosing Arizona as a place to find opportunity. And it will be waiting here for them because we know that for the fourth month in a row, and once the data is finalized for December, we will see 5 months in Arizona of 3% year-over-year job growth. That streak is the longest we've had in terms of job growth since before the Great Recession. And this continues this market narrative. The red curve represents total employment in Arizona. We're at all-time highs. The blue curve represents unemployment. We're at 10-year lows. And as a result of this healthy labor market in Arizona, our general fund revenue collections are up. The blue bars represent what we thought we would collect when we passed the budget last May. The red bar represents what we've actually collected. Through November, the final data that we have, we're up $175 million. So not only will we reach our revenue forecast for fiscal year 2019, but we're going to exceed it. And as a result, we're revising up our growth rates. Now, I think this is a really interesting chart because it shares with you the momentum that we're seeing from a revenue standpoint over the last fiscal year or so. In 2018, we saw 7.1% general fund revenue growth over fiscal year 2017. So 7.1%. What does that mean? Well, if you look at the 10-year post-recession average growth rate, it's about 3.2%. So we had an amazing 2018, and I suspect the locals here who are tracking revenues for their jurisdictions probably saw similar trends of upward revenue collections. So we're going to expect a 6.8% growth rate for 2019. So that's up from what we thought we would bring in. It was in the low fives. But we do moderate our forecasts in the out years in 2021 and 22 to match that longer run revenue growth rate of 3.2%. And so based on kind of the revenues that we've taken in so far, we approach putting together the budget with this information. This is what we call our first look. Now, the bars at the top represent, the red curve represents spending commitments. The blue curve represents how much revenue you have. Now, if the red The red line is above the blue line. You have a big problem. And in 2009, we were $3 billion upside down. We had to cut $1 billion. We had to mortgage our state capital for $1 billion, and we had to put on the ballot a 1-cent temporary sales tax in order to make ends meet. And you can see over the last several years, we've been able to flip those lines so that we have more revenues coming in than spending. And for the first time in 2017, we were able to have a structurally balanced budget. So going down to the table below here, you can see that right here, we have a projected cash balance for fiscal year 2020 of $1.1 billion. When the governor took office 4 years ago, we were facing a projected deficit of $1 billion. So a lot of hard work, tough decisions, smart planning to put us in this position to begin creation of the 2020 executive budget. So we had some principles in mind. A, that it needed to be structurally balanced, the budget that the governor unveiled, and B, that we could not repeat the mistakes of the past. You can see right here, these are the spending growth rates of the mid-2000s. Between 1982 and 2002, the average spending growth rate was relatively stable, between 3.5% and 4% each year. Then you see in the mid-2000s this huge ramp up in spending, topping out at 20% of spending growth in 2006 over 2005. Most of that tied to ongoing commitments. And we know how that turned out. We didn't have enough money to pay for it, and we had to slash and burn a lot of things that hurt a lot of stakeholders. And that's something that we cannot do moving forward. So we've kept a relatively tame and disciplined spending growth rate for the first 3 years in the low 2s. In 2019, we had a 6.4% spending growth rate, fueled in part by our teacher pay raise package and the rollback of recession-era cuts to the K-12 funding formula. And in the 2020 budget, we're proposing a 9.2% spending growth rate. A majority of that, however, is one-time in nature, and that is done by design in order to help provide financial flexibility in the out years should we run into any economic problems. But those one-time investments are targeted and they're strategic in order to maximize the state's investment. One other way that we're trying to preserve Arizona's fiscal future is by saving more money. We know that we're not saving enough. Financial experts look at Arizona. Here's how much we have. When you consider the rainy day fund and the reserves, it's a little over 5% based on their analysis. They're recommending anywhere between 10 to 15% that we need to have on hand of our total general fund revenues in the event of an economic downturn. So that's why the governor is putting in the single largest deposit into the rainy day fund since it was created in 1991. So it's been around $450 million since 2012, and we've not really made any deposits since then. It represents right now about 5% of revenues, and the governor's budget will take the rainy day fund up to $1 billion or 9% of revenues. Pew has done an analysis on this study and says that it will protect Arizona's revenue for 7 out of the 10 recession-era scenarios for a period of 6 years, which is the length of time that they observe it takes for Arizona to recover from an economic downturn. We're also regaining ownership of key state assets. If you recall, I mentioned that we mortgaged our state capital and other properties for $1 billion in the midst of the Great Recession. There's about $1.4 billion that we took out in debt, in operating debt. And over the last 10 years, we've paid down roughly $500 million. So as a result of having a smaller principal, we have equity, so to speak, in some of the collateral, and we're able to remove things like the state legislative buildings, the Supreme Court, the state fairgrounds, things that we had to mortgage to make it through the recession. And because we have a $950 million principal, it's smaller. We're financing it over another 10-year period instead of 20 years that we did in 2010. We have a better credit rating. We have lower interest rates. As a result of this effort, we will be able to save over $100 million between 2020 and 2030. Finally, to mention the supplemental funding, I discussed the concept before. I wanted to point out two key investments, the $25 million in the School Facilities Board building renewal grants. I'll mention it later, but this is a state agency that's established to help maintain our school district facilities, as well as build new schools for districts that qualify. We also included $5 million in our budget. This predates the water package that passed yesterday with Ms. Cobb's leadership in the House. We were including $5 million for agriculture infrastructure. The final package had an additional $2 million on top of some of the existing spending authority that was included in the 2018 budget. So our budget priorities for fiscal year 2020. If you recall, I mentioned we had a projected $1.1 billion cash balance. The executive budget proposes to save half of it, and then the other half, $538 million, we'd like to commit to executive initiatives, of which a majority of the $538 million is one-time in nature. So if you were to look at, okay, well, what's in the $538 million? What's it going for? Well, you can see right here, half of it's going to education, K-12 and higher ed. If you consider baseline and initiatives for budgeting speak, baseline are those reoccurring costs that you should expect every year, similar to your monthly electric bill. You're going to get it, you have to pay for it, you have to budget for it. So we have to budget for baseline costs like enrollment growth of students in our K-12 school system. Or the teacher pay raise package, that's in the baseline and it's advance appropriated, guaranteed for our teachers. So when you consider baseline plus the executive initiatives, you're looking at 70% of the new spending in fiscal year 2020 under the executive budget plan going for education. And we were very proud of how we constructed this budget and wanted to share that with you. So where does that leave us? Well, the governor's top priority is a fiscally sustainable and balanced budget. So when we put it together, we have to make sure that this blue line, this blue bar, is higher than the red bar. And throughout the entire 3-year budget window that we have to compile, that is the case. It's structurally balanced. So the $1 billion becomes $109 million in fiscal year 2020 because we save half and we spend half. Again, maintaining a positive cash balance and structural balance throughout the 3-year budget window. So now, so you don't have to listen to me the entire time, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Bingham, who's going to talk about some of our infrastructure projects in the Government That Works section.
Hello, I am a budget analyst, and to start with, I'm going to be talking about some of the transportation infrastructure that's included in the executive budget. As a result of implementing the public safety fee, the executive budget now can accelerate and expand some critical transportation infrastructure projects. The implementation of the public safety fee now frees up money that had been being used for highway patrol and now can use it for transportation infrastructure. One of these projects is on the I-17 expansion, and this includes $130 million between fiscal years 2020 and 2022 to accelerate and expand construction of a third highway lane on north and southbound segments of I-17 between Anthem and Black City Canyon. And this is in addition to the $193 million provided by the State Transportation Board's project. Additionally, another project made possible by the public safety fee is fully funding road maintenance. As you can see in this chart, last year the budget went from a 29% need funded to 79%, and this year we finish it by fully funding it at 100% by adding an additional $11 million to a total of $51 million. And for every dollar that we spend on maintaining good roads, that saves the state $6 in costs associated with rebuilding crumbling and unsafe roads. And on top of transportation infrastructure, we're also investing in the state's digital highway infrastructure. As Arizonans who live in rural areas know, rural internet connectivity is far behind the rest of the state. According to federal communications data, 825,000 Arizonans don't have an access to a high-speed internet connection, and only 10.6% of Arizonans in the state can subscribe to super fast gigabit internet, which is critical for a lot of 21st century jobs now. As you can see on this map, Arizona lags behind many of our neighboring states to the north and to the west when it comes to high-speed internet access. To address that, the fiscal year 2020 executive budget restores $7 million in funding for grants that attract, expand, or retain Arizona enterprise, and of that $7 million, $3 million will be used to establish a competitive rural broadband development grants program, which will provide critical funding to local projects across the state that develop high-speed internet infrastructure. The executive budget also includes efforts to save funding for counties. The fiscal 2019 budget included several initiatives aimed at restoring funding to county budgets, and this executive continues that. This table highlights some of the ones from last year and also what's included in the executive 2020 budget. One of them includes repealing 2 sections of state law that requires counties to annually contribute $11.2 million towards the operating costs of the Department of Juvenile Corrections. Eliminating this cost sharing, combined with other funding included in the budget, will result in counties receiving an additional $19 million in ongoing cost reductions for fiscal year 2020. Additionally, we are increasing the import capacity for the state. The Mariposa point of entry in Nogales is one of the largest ports of entry for fresh produce in the entire country, and currently it lacks the adequate cold room storage to accommodate many temperature-sensitive products, including fruits like berries, avocados, seafood, and some pharmaceuticals. And historically, this port has been the top port for the value of fresh fruit brought in, but it has dropped down to 3rd over in the mid-2000s, due partly to the lack of ability to handle these temperature-sensitive goods. To address that, the executive budget includes $700,000 to build a cold storage room within an existing federal inspection facility, with local partners also contributing $300,000. Once completed, this will help the state compete with other border states as carriers decide where to bring in their temperature-sensitive goods. And a University of Arizona study done on this project estimates that the new economic activity associated with the increased imports will lead to an estimated annual increase of 27 to 30 million in gross state product and 3.7 to 4.1 million in additional state and local tax revenues. I will now hand it back to Matt to discuss education. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. And I'm going to go quickly through some of these slides so that I know we're behind schedule. But we're including $637 million in various new K-12 investments that we'll quickly go through. $104 million in new higher education investments. This is the billion-dollar promise that the governor and the legislature made to K-12. The 20% pay raise by school year 2020 or fiscal year 2021, as well as the restoration of additional assistance. This is a component of the K-12 funding formula that pays for soft capital items such as textbooks, technology, school buses could be used for support staff as well as faculty. We're expanding results-based funding. This is a program started in 2018 to incentivize and allow schools to replicate and expand programs and practices that deliver positive student outcomes. We've had roughly 300 schools in 2018 and 2019 receiving these, and it generates a per pupil amount that the schools get awarded. If a school serves a student population that has 60% of which qualify for free and reduced lunch price program, then the per pupil amount would be $400. If a school serves a student population below that 60% threshold, it would be $225. And we basically used in 18 and 19 performance on the AZ merit exam. So if you were in the top 10%, you received that results-based funding. But we never intended for that to be the permanent method to allocate this results-based funding. We were going to use all along the A through F letter grade system because we know it not only takes into account achievement, but also growth, attendance rates, graduation rates, these indicators that we know have a significant impact on students' academic outcomes. So as a result, we have 454 A's that we're projecting that will receive this, either a $400 or $225 per pupil award. And we're also expanding the program to B schools that serve a student population above the 60% FRL threshold right here. So that adds 221. We want to recognize the excellence of schools serving high-need student populations. So that's a total package of $98 million for results in the classroom. This is the school safety package. We're including $9 million to fully fund the wait list. Schools asked for SROs, and over the last 3 grant funding cycles, we've had insufficient resources to fund their requests. Right now, 89 schools have not received an SRO that they requested, so we are providing the resources to do that. We're also including $6 million for a new school counselor and social worker program. We recognize the need of mental health in public schools to improve school safety so that we can identify early on challenges that kids are facing to address them before they escalate into something more dangerous for themselves and for others. And so last year we included $10 million to hire school psychologists for schools that meet certain income requirements. This year we're including $6 million for a pilot, and we're doubling that, or not a pilot, $6 million for this grant-based program, and we're doubling it to $12 million in 2021 to lower the caseloads for counselors and social workers in our schools, or to provide counselors and social workers to schools that currently do not have them. The career and technical education incentive package is another top priority of the governor. We're including $10 million to provide a $1,000 incentive payment to schools for each high school graduate that has earned an improved industry credential. This is a workforce relevant program. The Commerce Authority already identifies the workforce needs in various geographic areas of the state, and they convey that to the CTE board housed within the Department of Education. We're just adding money to help incentivize either expansion of the programs existing in areas such as manufacturing, construction. Those are no surprises there given the pace of job growth in the sectors. Healthcare, IT, business and financial services. So we're hoping to expand this. 10,000 students will be served in year 1 moving forward. This is our charter school accountability package. We're including 10 new staff to address the growing caseload. 17% of all K-12 students in the state attend a public charter school. So this is allowing them to conduct more frequent inspections, address complaints, and implement the new financial framework that will be released in the coming weeks. This is the building renewal application process that the School Facilities Board administers. So if a school district needs to replace a roof or an air conditioner, they'll file a grant request with the School Facilities Board, and that grant has to be processed and approved. Since 2013, the number of applications that schools are sending us has more than tripled, and this was to be expected because a lot of the building that went on occurred in the mid-2000s. So that 15-year, that 20-year useful life of equipment or facilities is being reached, and so we have to replace that, and we're fully funding the Building Renewal Grant Program by including a $25 million current year supplemental. You can see right here, this is the current appropriation of about $51 million that was included in the 19 budget. The utilization rate of this program based on the number of grant applications is up, and it will likely exceed the appropriation in the current year. So we're raising it by $25 million for a total of $76 million in 19, and we're providing $80 million in fiscal year 20 based on the utilization and application rates. This is another significant policy in the executive budget. Prior to 2013, schools that had a projected enrollment that exceeded the capacity of their schools within 2 years if they're in elementary school, or within 3 years if they're at middle or high school, would qualify for a new school building. The idea being that the schools would be built by the time the kids show up. In 2013, that was changed to a current year determination. So you have to be at capacity in the current year to qualify for that new school building. As you can imagine, that can create some problems because the kids are already there. Where do you put them? We've seen kids being placed in portable buildings or classrooms that are not suitable for the kinds of learning that need to happen. We have also seen acceleration of these new school construction projects to get the new buildings there as quickly as possible because the kids are already on campus. And districts have had to pay a premium for that. So we're returning to the 3-year standard. And these schools here would qualify for new buildings in the current year under the status quo law. And we would be adding Levine, Vale, Yuma, and Sahuarita to that so that those buildings will be there on time. The Teachers Academy is another key priority of the governor, $21 million to expand the program. So currently, students in the colleges of education are eligible to participate in the Teachers Academy. The idea is you receive a tuition benefit or assistance from the state. After institutional aid or scholarships or federal aid, that's applied to your bursar bill, and there's still something left that you need to pay, the state will pick that up. We're seeking to expand that to students outside the College of Education, students that are pursuing degrees in science, technology, engineering, or math. We're also seeking to provide 4 years of benefits to all the students in the colleges of education so that those students can graduate debt-free. We're also including a $1,000 stipend for juniors and seniors who agree to teach in a critical need area, rural schools, low-income schools, tribal schools, STEM-related courses, and special education. And finally, we're allowing non-resident students to participate in the Teachers Academy, as well as teachers already in the classroom with our alternative certificates, but pursuing their full certification through community college post-baccalaureate programs. And again, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, for every year of benefit that you receive from the academy, the teacher or the student agrees to teach in an Arizona public school for a year. So a year-for-year exchange. Some other targeted workforce investments, $26 million for Pima and Maricopa to double the size of Pima's Aviation Technology Center, and $6 million for buying equipment, healthcare equipment for Maricopa's new facilities. Just to note here, we're the only state in the nation that does not provide a tuition benefit for our National Guard members. And so we're including $1 million to do that. So for the health and welfare section, I'm going to introduce Yan Gao, who will discuss some of those initiatives.
Good afternoon, my name is Yan Gao and I'm a budget analyst, and I'm here to discuss the health and welfare initiatives of the governor for the executive budget. The executive budget includes $2 million in fiscal 20 and $9 million in fiscal year 21 to eliminate the Kids Care enrollment freeze. Kids Care is Arizona's Medicaid program that provides health insurance for children over 32,000 Arizona children. The federal government currently covers 100% of the cost of the program. However, a 2017 law would freeze enrollment in Kids Care if the federal match falls below 100%, which is scheduled to happen in September of this year, in which the federal match will drop to 90.5%. As a result, without Kids Care, families may forego medical care for their children, or in order to qualify for Medicaid, reduce their work hours or stop working altogether. Eliminating the freeze will allow parents to remain in the workforce and pursue opportunities for advancement that can free them from the need for government assistance. Next, the executive budget includes $56 million in federal funding to increase Arizona's child care subsidy rate. The program, operated by the Department of Economic Security, provides child care subsidies for low-income families and foster parents. Currently, Arizona has one of the lowest rates in the country compared to our neighbors. Half of the funding will be dedicated to increasing the subsidy rate. Currently, as you can see, the maximum Arizona rate is about $576. This new increase will put Arizona at $775, which will put us more in line with our neighboring states. In addition, the other half of the executive budget will also be allocated to serving an additional 5,000 children who are currently on the waiting list. The executive ensures that there is also dedicated funding for child care in Arizona. Next, the executive budget allocates a total of $11 million in federal funding for adult protective services and home and community-based services. The adult protective services provides case management for adults suffering from abuse. And in recent years, there has been an increase in caseload for adult protective services. In addition, the executive also allocates $5 million for home and community-based services, which provides Meals on Wheels transportation, nurse home visits for adults. This will allow the home and community services to serve their wait list of currently at 1,270 seniors in Maricopa County and about 3,200 seniors statewide. This commitment ensures that Arizona's seniors are safe from abuse and can stay in their home for as long as possible. Next, the executive budget includes $1 million to establish new prenatal care telemedicine grants. In March of 2018, the March of Dimes found that several areas throughout Arizona have a concerning lack of prenatal care resources, the majority of which are in rural areas. This puts women and their unborn children at a higher risk for complication during pregnancy and after birth. In order to better care for these vulnerable population, the executive budget recommends funding for telemedicine equipment to serve expectant mothers. In addition, the executive also contemplates an additional $1 million over the next 2 fiscal years to provide loan repayment assistance to those health professionals who provide these vital services in remote areas. Finally, the executive budget includes $1 million to support veteran suicide prevention efforts, or the Be Connected program. Currently, the Be Connected program provides a 24/7 hotline, a resource matching tool, and a training for community members who want to assist veterans. And over the last year, this program has served over 2,000 individuals. Therefore, this funding will ensure that these critical programs will continue to benefit Arizona's active military personnel, veterans, and their families. Next, I'll pass it back to Matt to discuss the natural resources section.
Thanks, Jan. So the drought contingency plan was the key component of the governor's natural resources section of the budget. It passed yesterday. The governor signed it. Representative Cobb was there as well at the signing ceremony. Excuse me. And it was not just the $35 million, but we had $6 million for conservation efforts included in the 2018 budget over a 3-year period, plus there was an additional $2 million added in at the last moment. So essentially what the $30 million is meant to do is it will be incentive payments for those who are legally entitled to the Colorado River water to keep that water in Lake Mead. Right now it's projected without the DCP to fall to roughly 1,000 feet by 2027. Once, and I'm sure you guys already know this, once you go below 1,000 feet, you reach dead pool, which affects the ability of the Colorado River water in Lake Mead to get through the Hoover Dam, affecting hydroelectricity production and the rest of the Colorado River system. So the idea here is to conserve water in Lake Mead, kind of flatten out that decline. It's still projected to decline, and give Arizona more time to prepare for that drier future. And the agriculture infrastructure projects here would be to assist in drilling groundwater wells in Arizona. We've been putting water into the ground for a number of years in the event that this was bound to happen. And so this is part of a larger package. I believe the governor quoted a legislator saying that this is not the end, but the end of the beginning in terms of moving Arizona forward and preserving our water future. The public safety component of the executive budget is comprised largely of a pay raise package, $74 million of which most of that will be going to the Department of Corrections and to the Department of Public Safety. We have a number of other agencies benefiting from this as well. They have AZ Post certified, and we're including raises for the Department of Child Safety and the Department of Health Services. Within Health Services, we're looking at the Arizona State Hospital. Why are we including such a large raise for our correctional officers in the Department of Corrections? It's because they are facing dangerously high vacancy rates. We're at 15% right now, and it's on the way to approaching 20%. If with that vacancy rate, you are in dangerously, it is creating a dangerous environment. We've seen a number of assaults go up as a result of not having adequate coverage in our prisons. We had a 1% vacancy rate back in 2011. So we believe that a 10% raise in year one and a 5% raise in year two will help address that issue. We also have a trooper pay raise package of 10%. Right now, the starting salary is about $47,000. It's much lower than our large law enforcement agencies that we compete with. So this will move the needle in that direction. We're including a 15% pay raise for our Department of Juvenile Corrections and their correctional officers. In 2018, we had a 100% turnover rate, in our YCOs. These positions are meant to rehabilitate troubled youth, and that cannot happen when you have such a lack of consistency here. So we're including a 15% pay raise for them. A 9% pay raise for caseworkers, among other raises for the Department of Child Safety. The legislative benchmark specifies that we need 1,400 caseworkers for a sustainable coverage of our child welfare cases. Right now, we've been unable to reach that, and we believe the 9% will help. Here are some other recidivism-related positions in our Department of Corrections. 50% of our substance abuse counselor positions are unfilled. 25% of our teaching positions within the Department of Corrections, they're unfilled. These our efforts in reducing the rate of recidivism, that is the return of prison for those who finish their sentence, cannot happen if we don't treat substance abuse issues in the prisons and ensuring that the educational services that that the inmates need are given to them so that they can have a real second chance. This is another issue related to second chance that we're continuing to work through. $12 million in public safety investments, more troopers, and funding DPS vehicle replacement. This is the public safety fee that has been discussed, and it's a very simple calculation. We look at the highway patrol budget, we divide it by the number of public safety fee eligible vehicles, and that gets you to $32. That's what it currently is right now. So we have an interest in increasing our investment in public safety in terms of pay and troopers and equipment, but we also have an interest in ensuring that that fee does not go above $32. So we're including general fund dollars right here of $20 million in the first year, and it declines to 11, 5, and 0. And it's able to decline because there's a natural growth, as evidenced by these red bars here, in public safety fee transactions. As I mentioned to you earlier, people are moving to Arizona, they're bringing their cars. They'll have to register them here, and that triggers a public safety fee. Those who are not of age to drive will eventually be, and they will get a car, and they'll have to pay registration, and that will trigger a public safety fee. So there's a natural growth rate in that fee that can offset the general fund support while holding the line and ensuring that that fee does not go above $32. Without the public safety fee, you would not have the elimination of the HERF sweep. You would not have full funding of the I-17 expansion and widening project that will eventually be, once that project's finished, We're going to look at another interstate that will benefit. And you would not have full funding of our preventive maintenance program. We are now able to put the most money ever in state history into preventive maintenance statewide to keep our good roads good for a longer period of time. So ultimately, where do we end here? Well, the starting point is $10.38 billion. We had $461 million in baseline spending, including our teacher pay raise that is guaranteed and will be fully implemented by school year 2020, fiscal year 2021, and $538 million in new initiatives. So a total spending package of $1 billion, or 9.2%, a majority of which is one-time, targeted, and strategic. We're including, so that's a total spending package of $11.36 billion. We include a $542 million rainy day fund deposit, and then we have an ending balance of $109 million, or a structural balance of $243 million. So ultimately, the governor said that Arizonans want a budget that reflects their priorities: funding public safety, funding child safety, funding education above and beyond inflation, and protecting Arizona's fiscal future and water future, and this budget does exactly that. I want to thank Sarah and Yan and Trista for accompanying us on the roadshow. This is our last stop. We saved the best for last, as they say. And I also want to thank my staff in Phoenix who helped make this budget possible. The budget is available on our website at azgovernor.gov, as well as this presentation. azospb.gov is another place you can find it. So with that, I'm finished, and this is your opportunity to share your feedback or ask any questions that you may have for us related to this budget or what happens next. So thank you. Hi, Mayor.